Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Elk Place Health Spot. This month, we are excited to partner with the Tulane School of Social Work Student Government Association to present information on sexual assault awareness. This is April Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We have with us today agencies that are experts in providing trauma-informed treatment interventions for survivors, as well as participating in collaborative advocacy efforts to address policies and laws regarding sexual assault in Louisiana. Carrie Mulder, TSSW student intern, will be in charge of our technology today and will be monitoring the chat and the questions. And student intern Jeremy Park will be dropping information about sexual assault and SA Awareness Month in the chat as well. SGA President Casey Thickpen will be introducing our guest. Thanks again for joining us, and please get as much information as you can today. This is a very important topic.
I would like to introduce to you Kelli Knight, Outreach Coordinator at Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault. Kelli, thank you for being here, and we're happy to hear from you.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all having me here. Let's see. So I'm going to share my screen. So I am with the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault, and we are the state coalition that provides technical support to 12 accredited centers, crisis centers throughout the state. We also do some direct services with survivors, but our important role is really the connections that we have with our crisis centers. This is just a little quote that I like to use. Connections with other people affect not only the quality of our lives, but also our survival. And that definitely is one of the things we like to remember, because we are working with survivors. This is just a little bit of information about us. Let's see, who is the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault? Well, our mission is we are committed to empowering survivors, engaging advocates, and changing systems and social norms to end sexual violence in Louisiana. Our vision is a world free from all forms of oppression that enable rape culture and sexual violence. Our values: we must center the voices of survivors in our work. We must promote autonomy and self-determination and support a survivor's informed decisions. Prevention. What is prevention? So sexual violence can be prevented. Communities have the strength to change our culture and end sexual violence by promoting healthy relationships and sex positivity. Anti-oppression. Sexual violence is intricately linked to oppression. Though anyone can be a survivor, we recognize that certain members of our community are more vulnerable, and we are committed to serving everyone. Vulnerable groups can include incarcerated survivors, sex workers, undocumented immigrants, racial ethnic minorities, and members of the LGBTQ+ community. Trauma. All trauma has serious and far-reaching consequences. Effective trauma-informed advocacy and support is vital to healing people. We are dedicated to laws and systems change. Rape myths permeate every aspect of our society, and laws, policies, and institutions can and should support survivors and be trauma-informed and promote equality. And finally, promote perpetrator accountability. The only person to blame for sexual assault is the perpetrator. So that's the foundation of how we interact with our communities. We have several programs. We have our justice systems program, and the justice systems program works with, in a nutshell, it works with entities such as law enforcement, hospitals, things, organizations that survivors might encounter immediately after they've been assaulted, or we work with them also in prevention, so and to become trauma informed. LaFASA's legal program is, we have a full-time attorney who provides legal advocacy to survivors. We have a presence on campuses throughout the state where we work with other programs as well as Title IX to ensure that students' rights are heard and to ensure that students understand that they have avenues that they can go through to receive care and support. Our prevention program is, has several programs that go into schools, such as Safe Dates for high school students and Courageous Kids for elementary age students. But basically, prevention is surrendered around the attitude that we are primarily trying to change our culture about what sexual assault is. We also have a PREA program, and that's the Prison Rape Elimination Act program. And our liaison works in the prison system to ensure that vulnerable prisoners and people who have been assaulted in prison have a voice and are represented. And last but not least, we have our brand new, launched back in about December, our text and chat helpline. And we're very excited about this because this is one of our direct service programs where we have crisis support specialists who can help survivors find short-term emotional support. They can help them create a safety plan. They can connect visitors to long-term support as well. And this is for any body in Louisiana. They can direct them to resources in any parish in our state. And currently, Louisiana is one of only 4 states that has a statewide text and chat helpline. And so that's very exciting because it's not just regional, it's not just specific to certain parishes, it's statewide. A little bit about our accredited, well, I have 11 here, I have to update that, we now have 12. But LaFASA is the coalition agency that serves our 12 sexual assault crisis centers through education, professional training, technical assistance, and community engagement. Our coalition accredits each center to ensure federal grants are received so that they can function and serve survivors. LaFASA and the centers are primarily funded by federal grants. Louisiana does not provide funding for sexual assault, and donations do not cover the vast cost to provide direct services to survivors. So we also provide materials for survivors as well as advocates. And so some of our brochures that we have, just a list of some of the things that we provide. They're fantastic resources. We have brochures, we have just certain types of materials like Title IX resources, white pages, things like that, that talk about the rights of students and for survivors. And we have webinars that educate so that we can change culture and communities. And just a kind of a list right here that you can look at: workplace sexual harassment, sexual violence 101, consent and healthy relationships and sexual violence in the LGBTQIA community, things like that. Those are free and available at your own leisure to view. And so that's LaFASA in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next panelist will be Brandy Giles Hernandez from the Family Justice Center.
Okay, I'm about to share my screen. Good afternoon. My name is Brandy Giles Hernandez, and I'm here with the New Orleans Family Justice Center. I would like to go over some things that we do and what our agency is about. Historically, our timeline of our services started out with the battered women's movement and anti-right movement of 1960 and 1970, which came out in the civil rights movement. Our grassroots focuses on shelter, hotlines, and rape crisis centers. Our main focus that we do help survivors to identify with intimate partner violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, and child abuse. We also see survivors that identify with polyvictimization, that's dealing with multiple traumas of their childhood, teen, adult, and currently. We do have Crescent House, which is our shelter for survivors that started in 1979. All that really is based upon the Family Violence Protection and Services Act of 1984. Also the Violence Against Women's Act of 1994. Some things of the Violence Against Women Act that we like to stand for and go over, providing much needed funding up until today, activists pushing awareness for gender violence in mainstream society. Many voices of women and people of color were not heard in calling out constraints of these issues. Originally, the Family Justice Center movement really started in San Diego in 2001. The Family Justice incentives were started in 2005 for $20 million. And they're currently there are 140 FJCs around the country and around the world. Let's skip over that part. Our agency really grew a lot. It started out in 2012, and FJC really split from Catholic Charities. They moved in our current location, which is 701 Loyola, where we have a Hope Clinic now that survivors can come to get forensic interviews, bring their children for services as well, for counseling, primary health care now that we have a provider, have a doctor here on property. Also staffed with counseling staff that's connected to the Hope Clinic. We see clients from different populations, whether they're homeless or dealing with IPV or sexual assault. Our staff has really grown over to 50 staff members and 11 partners. Those partners starts off with NOPD, sex crimes, and DV unit. We do work with the FJC legal team that provide legal services for survivors that need help with custody or divorce. The FJC is growing really fast across Louisiana. We have sites in Lafayette, Pineville, Bossier City, Monroe, and we just Baton Rouge location in a capital area just recently opened. Our structure is really funded on advocacy. Some are police led, some are district attorney led, some are city government led. All our structures have different advantages and disadvantages. These are some general areas where we can get help for survivors in Orleans Parish and outside and surrounding parishes. And we do work with LaFASA as well. They're great support and access for resources for survivors as well as START. Why do we need an FGC center? Our services are scattered. So we work with the police, where we have case management, public benefits, medical services, counseling services, support groups, children's services, civil attorneys, advocates, job training, childcare, transitional housing, court and shelters. As I said, since we have joint partnerships, we work with Tulane Law Clinic, NOPD, sex crimes, as I stated. We provide case management, the Hope Clinic, access to Lift attorneys, our housing program, which works with Unity for survivors, education and employment. We also work with SLS, Southeast Louisiana Legal Services, holistic healing program, and we work with our district attorney. Free and confidential services are offered here for survivors dealing with intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, child abuse, child sexual abuse, stalking, human trafficking, as well as secondary violence against survivors. And that's including all genders and sexual orientations are welcome. Here at the New Orleans Family Justice Center, we do provide 24-hour hotline services, emergency shelter, and transitional housing. We work with rapid rehousing, which is connected to our annex that recently about to reopen since the storm. Case management, risk assessment, and safety planning. Individual group counseling for adults and children ages 6 and up, as well as for secondary survivors. Holistic healing, which is yoga, art therapy, belly dancing, massage, ear acupuncture, strength training, etc. Medical advocacy program is 24 hours with UMC. Like I said, we have the Hope Clinic civil court appointment, which we support survivors when they attend civil court or criminal court, if they have a restraining order or any of those type of proceedings as far as divorce. Our civil services for restraining orders in custody and divorce and immigration. We also work with, as I said, NOPD sex crimes, domestic violence unit, and I stated all those other things as well that we offer. Here's a few pictures of yoga that we offer for survivors. When parents or survivors come in with their children, we have a safe place called Playland. It's an area for the children to do homework, work with the Playland advocates while their parents are here taking care of things that they need to confidentially and safely, where their little ears can't hear, but they also know they're in a safe place and that their parents are safe as well while they're taking care of their business here. Like in Crescent House is our shelter. This is a picture of what the office looks like, where clients will come in and meet with the shelter managers or the shelter advocates. This is kind of some pictures of the living room for survivors at the shelter. And this is kind of how Crescent House is set up for survivors and their children when they're staying at the shelter with us. That's pretty much the basics of what we offer for our survivors and their children, and for secondary survivors as well here at the Family Justice Center.
Thank you, Brandy. For
You're
our
welcome.
next panelist, we will have Javonda Nix, Advocacy Director at Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response.
Let me share my screen. All right, hello everyone. Like Casey said, my name is Javonda Nix. I am the Advocacy Director here at STAR, that stands for Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. STAR started off in the 1970s, and it was a part of the District Attorney's Office at that time. At that time, we were providing limited services to survivors. It was basically counseling services. The services weren't confidential because survivors had to come into the district attorney's office. With the blessing of the East Baton Rouge District Attorney's Office, we were able to split off and become a nonprofit. We did that in 2012 in Baton Rouge. And with that split, we were able to provide more services for survivors. So that's a little history about STAR. STAR's mission, hey y'all, that's me. STAR's mission is to support survivors of sexual trauma, improve systems response, and create social change to end sexual violence. We have a vision that one day we will build a healthy community free from oppression and sexual trauma. STAR, we have 3 different locations. When we were able to do that split that I mentioned earlier in our history, we were able to expand our services. So now we have services in 3 different areas. One is Baton Rouge, one is Alexandria, and one is in New Orleans. And with that, we're able to serve 15 different parishes. Those parishes are Ascension, Avoyelles, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Grant, Iberville, Jefferson, Livingston, Orleans, Point Capee, Rapides, St. Tammany, Vernon, West Baton Rouge, and West Feliciana. So with that, we're able to expand our reach to reach more survivors to get assistance. The services that we provide for survivors are advocacy, counseling, and legal services. So under our advocacy program, we're able to, it's a case management piece. So we're able to connect survivors with different resources in the community. We provide hospital accompaniment. So with that, we are able to meet survivors at the hospital and support them throughout their forensic exam. And also do follow-up services if that's what the survivor wants us to do. Under advocacy, we do manage the 24/7 hotline, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Basically, we're linking survivors to different resources, doing crisis intervention, safety planning, those kind of things. In counseling, they're able to do serve both primary and secondary survivors, doing individual counseling and as well as group counseling. So a primary survivor is someone who the assault happened to. Secondary survivor are family and friends of that person. We also provide legal service, so that's civil legal services to survivors 11 and up. And with that, we are able to help them with protection orders. For example, if a survivor was to get assaulted in their apartment and they don't feel safe anymore and they want to get out of their lease, our legal team will be able to assist with something like that as well. In addition to, say for instance, a survivor was to conceive from a sexual assault and then wanted to, the assailant didn't want the assailant to be a part of that. Our legal team will be able to help with something like that as well. So again, as I was saying, services for survivors, we provide a 24/7 hotline. That number is 1-855-435-STAR, where either a staff person, an advocate, or a volunteer, when it's after hours, is able to kind of provide survivors with different information, whether that's providing safety planning at that time, any kind of crisis intervention, trying to see what their needs are on that phone call. So, we help with that. I explained a lot of this already with the accompaniment with medical exams. We also do law enforcement accompaniment, interviews, court proceedings, all those things like that. So services for survivors at STAR are confidential and we don't charge. So it's no cost to the survivor to receive services for at STAR. So say for instance, another community partner called, or just a random person called our hotline and wanted to know if a survivor was receiving services at STAR, we would not be able to disclose that information to that person unless the survivor gives us permission to do so. So that's what I mean by confidentiality. STAR also provides services for community members, businesses, and organizations. So with that, we provide education and training and consulting work as well. So for a community, we do outreach and community engagement. So like tabling at different universities, different organizations around the city in our respective service areas. We could provide those kind of engagements. We do provide education for youth concerning healthy relationships, preventing dating violence and sexual violence. And we provide education for adults on how to respond to survivors when they disclose to you, or just on sexual trauma in general, building cultures to prevent sexual violence. Our education for youth is at no cost, but we do charge for like other like businesses. So training programs we provide to employees and leaders. It could be, and this is a lot of like the consulting work, workplace harassment, intervention and prevention, building a positive work culture, managing conflict in the workplace, understanding the continuum of behaviors that are considered as sexual violence, and it impacts on individuals and organizational levels. As I mentioned earlier, the responding to disclosure of sexual harassment and assault, and the neurobiology of trauma and its impacts on individuals. So for institutional and organizational support, we provide trainings, preventing harassment and assault. We can also take it, beyond like compliance-based approaches to help effectively prevent and address workplace harassment and sexual misconduct. So some of the things that, we have customized is culture assessments and planning for change, policy and procedure audits, policy and procedure development, and coaching for leaders and managers. So STAR has also been recognized on several levels, both state and local. We have been recognized for Program of the Year with the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault in 2015, for our Legal Services Innovation Award with the Louisiana Association in 2017, and then the Nonprofit Organization of the Year, again, with the Louisiana Association of Nonprofit Organization in 2019. So if anybody need any resources or any support, you can always call our hotline that I mentioned earlier. The number is 1-855-435-STAR. And that's it.
Thank you, Javonda. So now we're going to move to our question and answer segment. And we have several questions that we have shared with our participants. So we want to ask them specific questions regarding their work in sexual assault. And I think Carrie might have the first question.
Yes, I do. So I know that you all provide services to a variety of ages, and we know that, you know, sexual assault can happen across the lifespan. So what is it possible to talk to children about the concept of healthy relationships and consent? And if that's possible, how do you do that? How do you talk about kids about this very complicated subject matter?
Well, it is complicated, and but it's important. Your phrasing healthy relationships is key to that. Kids do need to understand that they are special individuals, and they need to understand that while they're supposed to listen to adults, we always tell them to, but when it comes to their bodies, they're the boss of their bodies. And so they have to understand that adults have to understand it's both physically and emotionally healthy for children to understand, you know, something that might be inappropriate or even criminal. So we go about that through, like I mentioned, there are programs that our centers implement. STAR mentioned that they do that, as well as NOFJ. We have some great programs. Courageous Kids is one of them, and I think we're going to be updating that one actually pretty soon. But it talks about how somebody is supposed to interact with a child physically and emotionally, and just go from there.
And just to piggyback off of Kelli, healthy relationships, it doesn't just have to be something that's romantic. So just making sure like kids understand that it can just be, you know, with a family member or a church member, and just making sure like they're able to point out red flags in different relationships, and that relationships supposed to have an equal respect and safety, making sure that safety is a part of that and trust is a part of those relationships is always important to kind of convey to kids. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with doing something, you don't have to. You can say no, whether it's adult or one of your peers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with Kelli and Javonda. I mean, dealing with kids, of course, is a unique time to bond with children, but to explain to them about consent and what safe consent is and safe touches. I think when you're dealing with smaller kids and even going to preteen, some examples are like when they see the doctor for a physical, explain to them, start out that way. I think is a good way to teach them about what's a safe touch, what's not a safe touch, or just, or what a relationship is, whether that be with a coach or teacher or daycare. But we know that times are changing now where you see some things those roles have changed, where sometimes those are, have been listed as abusers or they're perpetrators. In recent up and coming times that we've seen, especially with teen settings. So I think starting out with that is a good way to explain to them about what consent is and what a safe relationship is, whether that's just a friend, a neighbor, a teammate, a teacher, or a pastor, or any forms of adults. Because kids are always taught to respect adults, to don't to be disrespectful. So I think sometimes that gets confused with kids sometimes when unfortunate settings happen, when they feel like, are they in a safe place to disclose something?
To piggyback off of that, we have had a big influx of sex trafficking in the New Orleans area, really in the Louisiana area. And recently, I attended a program where several governors across states have joined with their wives to start coalitions against sex trafficking. Can y'all speak on that topic?
It has become prevalent, especially during this time where we've gotten online a lot. Most of the trafficking is occurring by perpetrators grooming children through online games and things like that. And so they separate them from, you make them feel like they don't need their families, and then they can act upon that. And I'll defer to Javonda or Brandy for any further information.
Well, just to piggyback off of for you, Kelly, with sex trafficking, you see it a lot within vulnerable populations, individuals who are not connected to resources or a support system and families. As Kelly said, you do see it a lot in the gaming because, perpetrators will definitely create relationships with youth and gain their trust. So they think, they're their friends, I can trust them. And then once they create that bond or that level of trust, they start asking them to do other things. So it then transitions off into like a world of sex trafficking that they didn't know that they were getting themselves into. I'm thinking about an example when I was at a hospital accompaniment and just kind of talking to one of the parents and how, she was saying that this actually happened to, someone that she knew, where it was a gaming system that they were being a part of. And they thought this was like, they were going to see somebody that they were created a relationship, like a romantic relationship with online. And they literally left their house. Parents didn't know, caught a bus. And when they got to where they were going, it wasn't what they expected. So that's how easily it can happen and how quickly it can happen for as like sex trafficking. They are preying on those vulnerable populations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree with both of you all. I know like Snapchat and a lot of the dating apps where I know Snapchat or Twitter for a lot of younger population, they tend to meet people on there. Either they may like something, or I think with Snapchat, once you post something, it kind of like you can continue to talk to somebody or disappear, but they build that trust level of saying, oh, I may be going to, they may have a mutual thing. I like this song, or I like your post, or I like this emoji or shoe that you like, what builds interest for this person, continue talking to them. And they build this trust of like, oh, we like the same things, or what are you doing the next weekend? I'll be here. And I've noticed that that's what a lot of trust is built. And the vulnerability is a lot of people that get, or children that get caught in these things are looking for things like, oh, well, my parents can't afford to buy me this type of new shoe that's out, or I'm not able to go to this social setting. So they build trust like that and say, well, I can get you tickets to this. If it's okay, can you meet me here? Or far as like dating apps, I find like with a lot of dating apps where people may talk for a little series of texts for a couple of months and build that trust, or say, oh, I'm a student too, and I go to this school as well. We're having this event. And that's where a lot of the interaction starts to build up, or as a relationship or a friendship. A vulnerable population is a lot of clients that identify with immigration or being undocumented. I find that I see a lot of young people, sometimes their parents are not even aware of what's going on because there's a language barrier, right? So if your kid may speak English and mom or dad doesn't, they build relationships with maybe a friend at school, or they may allow their child to go over to this person's home, and it may start up with homework, I noticed, and then it leads up to going out to other type of things. And then this is where the child may be removed, or a family being trafficked to make money, or saying, I'm going to call the police on you, or I'm going to call ICE if you don't do this. And that leads into what we have now.
That's amazing. So, Carrie, do you have the next question?
Yeah, I sure do. You all sort of touched on this a little bit as you were talking about vulnerable populations and communities. So we tend to think of sexual violence as a personal issue, but it's got some systemic and structural roots. Can you elaborate on some of those?
Just to kind of elaborate on that, sexual violence is the least persecuted crime that we have. So when you think about a survivor reporting to law enforcement, and especially when you think about survivors from vulnerable populations, or if you think about African-American survivors who don't really have much trust in law enforcement to start off with, or you even with LGBTQ survivors, like they don't trust law enforcement. So it's just like, why would I report this? And you have a perpetrator that is saying that nobody's going to believe you anyway if you report. So now we have the system that you're thinking that is against you. Also, perpetrator is putting these thoughts in your head that nobody is going to believe you anyway. So, and then the perpetrator is like, okay, what's the likelihood of me being held accountable if this is the least prosecuted crime? Then you just have this system that is just not working for survivors. So, we have a issue of, survivors really just not wanting to report in the beginning and getting involved in that system.
And so how do you see that trauma play out in the daily lives of survivors?
Well, for most of the time, they're hesitant to even reach out for services because of like the backlash or the stigma around it. Also, like I said before, just people, society and communities not believing them. And I can only speak from the African-American community because that's, the community that I'm mostly associated with, is that, we always say what happens in this house stays in this house. So it's just like, if you have your grandmother who has been sexually assaulted and your mom who has been sexually assaulted, now you're sexually assaulted, they're almost like, I've dealt with it, you can deal with it. So again, that is also a thing that deters people from reporting, just because they think nothing is going to happen or nothing is going to come out of it anyway. So, why report it? And it also shines a light on you. Survivors get questions of, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? What could you have done better? Instead of asking perpetrators, why are you perpetrating? Like we're asking the question backwards. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, what you're saying, Javonda, is so spot on. Because sexual assault is a power-based violence. It's power-based violence. It's someone who's in a more powerful position taking advantage of someone who's more vulnerable, and that's what it is. It's never the survivor's fault. And to elaborate to, from a family unit, we see this also, like recently, we've been seeing it as a lot of athletic programs. And it's, because we have these athletes, we have coaches, we have administrators they're on that upper tier, and they don't feel like what they do is going to be wrong, because they do blame the survivor. They'll say that the survivor misunderstood what was going on. Was it really a rape? Or they're just lying to get what, because they want to have some sort of relationship with this athlete. And it'll start in high school. You'll start with athletes in high school, and coaches will hear about situations, but they excuse it because they don't want to, take away the bright future of this athlete. And so it perpetuates itself on into college. And so, yeah, we see it in other systems as well.
And then the survivor is left with having to live their daily lives with this trauma and this experience.
Exactly.
And they feel the shame, and they do not get treatment, and it spills over into the workplace, into the family life, and into their social life.
And that is the biggest reason why survivors don't report, why it is one of the most underreported crimes. Less than 40% of victims report the crime because of the backlash, because they feel like they're gonna be blamed, and just like you're saying, they're gonna be shamed. Nobody's gonna understand. They're gonna say that it really was the victim's fault.
And I think that is the very reason that programs like STAR and the family justice system do offer services past the event. So, for those of you who might be listening, understanding that these organizations recognize that people may not report immediately. And so that if you are starting to feel the repercussions of such an event in your life, then you can always go to the Family Justice Center or to STAR for treatment services. So.
I think Brandy, you wanted to add a little bit to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I agree with what everyone said. I've noticed when I first started as an advocate, when I saw a lot of survivors of sexual assault, they were dealing with systematically, they were dealing with a lot of generational sexual abuse, either in their family, either this was their first time ever disclosing, and then when they would hear to an advocate, but if they ever disclosed to a family member, what I would always hear was the parent may say, "Well, what happened to me? You'll be all right. I mean, I had to survive, so you got to survive. Why you think you're so special? Or I've seen, as you all stated, the most safest place that most women are, they go to work, right? They go to church, they may go to a grocery store, and these safe places at your job, most women are getting assaulted on their job. It starts that way with a comment, or when an employee happened to be a female, or either if they were transgender or identify with other communities, when they stand up for themselves and share, I find that the first thing they say, like, "Oh, they're just doing it for attention," or "You just want a promotion," or "You're trying to say I don't like you because you're this or that." And I find a lot of survivors don't say anything because they see like these, sometimes I've had clients say, I see these huge cases on TV where like celebrities, for instance, like we see Johnny Depp, and they had an actor, I want to say, that recently got arrested. And all these ladies came out with saying this stuff about him. They built a whole thing on Instagram, and recently he just got charged. But the first thing they said, no one wanted to listen to him because they thought, oh, they just want clout. They want clout for Instagram. So no one believed them. I think that trend has gone on a lot now, where when a survivor does speak up, it's like, well, you're poor, you're on Section 8, you live in the projects, you have limited education, or if you do have education, you have a master's, nobody's going to believe you. Like, please, you have all this education, I dare you let someone touch you or do this to you, when it's so undermined of someone's personal space, and they've been attacked multiple times. And a lot of these times survivors just feel like giving up because they tried multiple times to go into the police and they're just like, oh, we're tired of coming here. This is the same old thing. We're just going to document this as a disturbance, and you go over here, you go over there, or someone ends up getting arrested sometime, you know, or even when the police do show up and they try to share, a lot of survivors are scared to say, I've been sexually assaulted by my husband, because they don't get believed that in a marriage that a person can be sexually assaulted or in a relationship. And we know that's not true. We know that's true, that they can be multiple times, you know, but it's just overlooked because you're married. So deal with it.
So important to note that you can be sexually assaulted by your spouse or husband. Very important point, Brandy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, the next question is, what part does the media play in how sexual assault? You guys just talked about it a little bit in terms of platforms and social media platforms and you know, these athletes, but what part does the media play in sexual assault and how people perceive it?
Do you want to go, Javonda?
Well, I mean, the media, whether that is social media platforms or just the news in general, plays a huge role in how survivors are perceived, whether they paint a sexual assault in a positive light or a negative light. The followers are going to see it, and it starts to put thought processes in their mind about it. I'm just thinking about the R. Kelly documentary. R. Kelly had been sexually abusing young girls for years, and look how long it took for that to even come out. And then once the documentary came out, it's just like, wow, but this is something that we've been through. Think about when he was seeing Aaliyah at 14, that wasn't okay. Like, why nobody didn't say anything before now that we saw this documentary? But also that goes to tell you that the media can play a part, because once the documentary came out, people start seeing it for what it really was. Before then, you really, you didn't have conversations about it. I'm sure as the documentary displayed, it was so hard for the girls to even get out, because where would they go? It was their thought process. So yeah, the media plays a big part.
Yeah, and I think that they since, like Javonda's pointing out, to that documentary, that was used to sell a story. Somebody benefited off of that. And I think that the media a lot of times does use a story to just sensationalize what's going on so that they get more clicks or they sell more stories or whatever. Unfortunately, I think that happens. What I would like to see the media do is to use that, since they are getting that attention, and to just educate readers and followers on what sexual assault is and why, the survivor is the true victim, and why the survivor didn't play a part in this sexual assault at all.
Yeah, I agree with all of you all. I feel like when it comes to the media, they glorify certain people just because of who they are, not about the survivor story. As you brought up, a good example was like R. Kelly, and you can look at Bill Cosby. I forget the other gentleman's name that killed himself in jail. When all that stuff started to come out, even with over in the UK, we saw how they handled that situation. I feel like they look at the key players of, okay, I'm building interest on the media, but we know now media is turning social media platforms. So a lot of people run to social media, whether it's factual or not, to get what they think is real news So then that turns into a overkill of about the person, but not the story. I think social media likes to look at, sometimes they get in a lot of victim blaming, because when a survivor does come out, you find out more about a survivor's personal life, if they have children, if they have an education, they want to expose them. Like, oh, she's had multiple marriages, or she was promiscuous, it's always, but they don't look into the perpetrator's trail, their track history of where other people may have reported something, but they got hush money, or they belittled their career, or, made them feel so low that they just go live underground. Or sometimes these people are suicidal, they started having mental health issues, triggers that we know that happen when you go through these things, but it's more focused on, look at them, look how they look at her dress, she wore this, to court when she went to testify to her story. So as Kelli said, I would love to see the media be more proactive about sexual assault awareness in general, about abuse, not like what you said with the R. Kelly story, because then that's spun off into part 2. Now we have all these more survivors that are coming out from his childhood, that were in the music industry, and other women that were that's in the public eye, and now saying, hey, I'm a victim too. And now they're like, oh, now what's going to be the spinoff? A book deal, a movie deal, but none of this relief. Or is it really going to survivors? Are they going to support them getting counseling or therapy? I wish the judges would put that in there when in there, do something to make them pay back, just not just the money, but to really help them for the rest of their life, not just this, oh, we got this settlement, so the survivor is good now. But money is not going to change what happened to them,
Thank y'all so much for that insight. The media has so much power. It would be nice, as Kelli said, to see them use it for raising awareness and instead of, further exacerbating the, negative feelings that victims experience, right, during assault. So yeah, that would be nice if the media were able to kind of do what we're doing today, raising awareness and talking about preventative measures. I'm going to shift us a little bit into kind of talking about policy and policy changes. We're School of Social Work, and so we're thinking of this, systems level, individual, but also a policy level. So what kind of policy changes would you like to see to better support survivors? Brandy kind of just mentioned one of asking perpetrators to pay for therapy of their victims, right? So thinking about policy, to support survivors, prevent violence, and then are there any bills that are currently in the federal legislature, state or federal legislature, that could be helpful or harmful to this effort?
Well, you want to go, Kelli?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so SAR does actually do a lot of like policy work. Actually, our old legal director, Morgan, she plays a huge part within the legislation. So
I'm going to interrupt and just say that Morgan just won the Visionary Voice Award, nationally recognized award. So she is very good at what she does, and she is a tiger at getting legislation.
Yes, she tries to drive it on through, but just the some of the legislation in the House that is a priority. One is House Bill 520, where this bill ensures that survivors have access to contraception at the hospitals. Not all hospitals provide that. Catholic-based hospitals, they don't provide that. So when survivors show up for a forensic exam, if they when they were assaulted and the perpetrator ejaculated, they won't be provided any kind of contraception, plan B. They will have to get that on their own outside of that hospital. So that is one of the bills that we are fighting to get passed. And then another one is House Bill 431, This bill ensures that the DNA collected from the survivor for the rape kit is not entered into CODIS. So when survivors report to the hospital for a forensic exam, they do a buccal swab, right? So they can separate the survivor's DNA from the perpetrator's DNA. So just making sure that survivors' DNA is not entered into CODIS, into the database.
And Javonda, just to clarify, CODIS is a national database.
It's a DNA database.
Yeah, that police use to find people, right? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. You're absolutely correct. And then I'm trying to see what is another one that
I think HB 313 is a good one, Javonda. They're trying to get it so that sexual assault victims have access to their forensic exams.
Like the medical records, right?
The medical records, yeah. Currently, there are some hospitals that prevent them from getting that, some medical units and law enforcement as well. So they want to make it just across the board, no questions asked, they can have access to that.
That is so surprising that has to go through a legislative process to happen. Shocking.
You know, everything does. I mean, it's just, I don't know, but it's there. So,
right.
Positive steps.
Yes. And guys, what can our listeners or viewers do to help you to promote those bills with their individual legislative folk?
Well, one is reach out to your elected officials. We put them in office for a reason, and that reason is to support things that we are in favor in, that we believe in, that will help our communities. Also, you know, volunteering. Volunteering, I think, will help. Also becoming an active bystander. When you see something, say something. When you see something that is not right, making sure you say something and speak up, because that person, that survivor might not have a voice, but you have a voice and you can help that situation. You know, that's all I could think of.
So, yes, so you can definitely call your legislative representative and tell them that you are in favor of these individual House bills.
And usually, I know that STAR is very active at putting information online. Our legal advocate, Sean Cassidy, just provided me with a list. So we'll have these posted so that, because these are the bills that are being considered right now. So this is time to look at them and be able to call your representative to before or against something. And we'll post that as well on our website. We'll have it probably in our blog, one of our blogs, which is accessible through LaFASA.org.
Something that Javonda said, I wish our legislators were like doing regular season of politics. You get so much stuff on your door, signs everywhere, so much postage. You know, I wish that we would have that same support around sexual assault. Just because, I mean, word of mouth is one thing, but one thing people know, somebody's gonna knock on your door during election time. You're gonna see people all in your neighborhood with clipboards. I mean, by the masses. And
that's
I think
a great idea.
Yeah, for real.
Like, have the bills that are being passed and just knock on people's doors and tell them,
put a sign out, you know. I mean, it's the same type of energy, so we need the same type of energy for these bills, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Yeah, maybe we could start a new movement. The crazy ladies in teal or something. I don't know. I don't know.
Is it my turn to ask the question?
Okay.
whenever there's a lull, I'm like, oh, is it me? Am I missing it? I haven't really seen any questions from our audience, but just as a reminder to them, they're welcome to drop those in the chat or put them in the Q&A for the audience. And so, you all do such amazing work, and the staffs at your organizations do such amazing work. And we think about, again, coming from like the social work perspective, this is heavy lifting that your staff are doing. And we're very appreciative of the way that they all support survivors. But when you're experiencing these heavy, doing these heavy lifting for other people and holding space for other people, what can we be doing for ourselves, right? Looking after our own self-care. If we're providing support to a sexual assault survivor, what can we be doing for ourselves to support our self-care so sort of lessen the effects of secondary trauma? And then if you all have self-care practices, you're welcome to share those as well.
One thing I would say for is like self-care, making sure you have a strong support system in place for yourself, like being able to name off those people that are a part of your support system. Also having access to secondary survivor support groups so you can learn how to support yourself and support the survivor. And then outside of just the sexual trauma, pointing out what brings you joy, like what can you do that actually bring you joy? For me, I haven't been doing too much of it because of work, but like exercising helps. Going out to dinner helps. Sometimes I just go out by myself and that helps too. Sometimes just sitting, right? Just sitting and being with yourself, being one with yourself is always helpful. It helps me to like self-reflect on things of that nature. What my day, sometimes I'm just going inside just to really just sit down, because this work that we do is very hard. So I might not answer the phone for my mom, and that's okay. Like she'll understand, like right now I just need at least 20 minutes to myself to kind of debrief and relax. And then because she might be calling about something that, ma'am, I don't want to talk to you right now. But some of those things are very helpful.
Well, I know that that STAR and NOFJC are fantastic at providing classes and like yoga and art therapy. I think y'all mentioned those earlier. And those are free to survivors and to advocates. So, and they post those regularly on their social media. And when I see them, I'll post them on our LaFASA's Facebook and social media, just so people are aware of what's going on, because those kinds of things are so important. You just, because you can find your support system there. If it's something, whether it's virtual online and you're seeing people, or if it's in person, you can find some people that you share that camaraderie with. And so they're some of the best organizations to find those types of interactions. LaFASA also has a little coloring activity book that online. It's a centering and grounding coloring activity book for survivors or advocates who just like Javonda said, you need a moment for yourself, and you can print it out. It's free, and have that. It provides little exercises, breathing exercises, different things like that you can go through, or you can color. Coloring is very therapeutic, so you can have it for that as well.
I agree with both of you all. As far as like disconnecting from work sometimes, which is sometimes hard, so I have to put my phone down when I get off work. I just kind of turn it down. I try not to watch the news right when I get in sometime. Because I find like when you work in this work, sometimes your family members call you telling you stuff, or like you may just run to somebody wants to disclose something now that you know you work there. So sometimes I have to be like, okay, I need just a little minute to get myself together. I find personally, I like this brand, Dr. Teal's brand of lavender. They have the Epsom salt, the oil. It's at Walmart, so it's $5.45 for each item. I think it's really cool. Just personally, because sometimes you just need to get that, just get yourself together, candles, I think are really good. And incense, I really like. Ear acupuncture, like Kelly was saying, like I only got into ear acupuncture a couple of years ago when I first started working here, and I try to bead. I'm getting myself trying to needle, but I like ear acupuncture is really cool with the beads. I agree, like drawing and painting is something I like too. And sometimes, like Javonda said, sometimes I just get quiet, just sit down outside and just get a breath of fresh air. Sometimes just lay in the grass. I'm trying just like the kids, just take a roll, just to let your hair down.
I like everything you ladies said. It's so important. Breathing is so important when you do this work. For those of you who don't know, I worked at the Family Justice Center. I was one of the people who opened the FJC in 2012. And so I've done the work, I've seen it, I've felt it. And it's so important to breathe, even in between appointments. If you're going to see survivors, don't schedule back-to-back appointments with your survivors. Make sure that you take a moment to breathe in between, say hi to a coworker, check on a coworker in between. I love the idea of coloring. I just love it. The adult coloring books are really intricate and fun, very important. And just, finding your own joy and making sure that you have that time to be with yourself and present and in the moment. All very, very good things to do to practice self-care, and very important.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love all of those things. I should have been taking notes. So we have a question from the audience. One of our attendees, Dr. Kruger, asks, what are some of the things that we should be aware of regarding LGBTQ victims of sexual violence?
Well, I guess one of the most important things we have to understand is that they are at a higher vulnerability level. More than half of members of that community have been sexually harmed in some capacity, which is much higher than any other demographic. So I guess just understanding, approach somebody in a trauma-informed way when you're working with members of the LGBTQ plus community.
Also, I would add into that, Kelly, because that community is a vulnerable population, they are less likely to report to police, right, as well. So, like Kelly said, coming at that, that community in a trauma-informed way, in as well as, making sure they understand what the reporting process looks like, will be very important. Letting them know that they have a right to have an advocate with them when they report to law enforcement, like those kind of things. Just providing that education if someone from their community disclosed, so they can feel comfortable with receiving services, letting them know what services are available to them. And like I said, providing education around it. And that's for everybody, because it is a hard thing to disclose to somebody that you have been sexually assaulted. So making sure they understand what rights they have and what services are provided to them, I think is most important.
Yes, I agree too, in that anyone from the LGBTQ plus community or trans community can get an exam just like anyone else could. They have the right to do so, whether they go to the hospital or if they can ask for an exam. I find sometimes that survivors that identify with those communities feel like they can't just because some of the staff are not trauma informed, so they don't feel properly identified, especially like far as pronouns, or people may judge them based on the way they came in or assume that they wasn't sexually assaulted, but they're just drunk or high or something, inappropriate. But there are resources there. They can ask for an advocate, definitely for sure. Like Kelli and Javonda said, and if they feel like they're not being respected, they can always ask for a supervisor. Same thing with the police or any kind of interactions at the hospital. But most medical staff are pretty on their bearings regarding that. But absolutely, they have just as many rights as anyone to get services and support. And if they feel like they can't, that's the purpose of all our agencies, for them to be welcomed to get services and get help.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Any more questions? Casey, would you like to add anything? No? Okay, that's fine. So guys, this has been so informative, such an important topic of conversation. There are layers and layers and layers of issues as it relates to sexual assault and sexual violence. One of the things that Carrie just put in the chat was to talk about sexual violence, Tulane sexual violence website, but also just to understand that it happens everywhere. It happens on campuses, it happens in families, it happens with strangers, it happens with people you know. And so, we have to be really aware and trauma informed as we deal with individuals. As we stated earlier, we do not report. It is not reported often. So, when you're dealing with people who may have other issues, or you see as having mental health issues, or may just be, having a bad day, it must be done from a trauma informed perspective, just based on the statistics that we know. So just wanted to say that. Carrie, do you have anything else? There's a lot of information in the chat. Please feel free to pick up on it. And so we are going to introduce, I didn't introduce Dr. Parquet earlier, but Dr. Parquet, who is part of our HealthSpot team, is going to wrap us up with some final comments.
Okay, I want to thank you all so much for providing this information about this so very important work that you all are doing. And certainly for providing and sharing resources that are available to survivors of sexual violence. We also want to thank you for taking a social work approach. You all emphasized a lot the strengths perspective and the strengths approach in working with survivors of sexual violence. This notion of sex trafficking, you all, I'm sure, are aware that New Orleans has become a major center for sex trafficking, primarily because of the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of visitors that come to our city every year. They're attracted by events such as the recent Final Four college championship that was here in the city, where hundreds of thousands of visitors came. We have Super Bowl, we have the Mardi Gras, we even have Jazz Fest, where many persons come to this city to visit, and we see this significant increase in sex trafficking, around those major events. Kelli, thank you for the work that you're doing and that LaFASA is doing in terms of working with survivors. You mentioned something that I think is extremely important, We talked about the FREA program, and quite frankly, there's really not enough attention being paid to sexual violence that's occurring in our prison system, the adult and the juvenile systems as well. When you were talking about blame, I thought about the work that Michael White does, attribution of blame. And one of the statements you made was that the person to blame for sexual assault is the perpetrator. And that is so important to emphasize. A lot of our young people who are survivors oftentimes blame themselves for the events that happen to them. But as you said, we must blame the person for these sexual assaults, and that person is the perpetrator. Brandy, just thank you so much for the work that you're doing at the New Orleans Family Justice Center, shelters, hotlines that are available. And I'm sure you guys know this, but Crescent House actually saves lives. It's literally can be life-saving for survivors of violence. I was just curious about how many spaces do you all have available at the Crescent House?
That's like a hot commodity, like most of the time we're always full to capacity. Like right now we working on the transition housing for the annex for the overflow for survivors to go to, since now we have a housing program which will relieve the shelter for vacancies for new families and children to come to. So it's always full. It's so hard sometimes to get people in, but they try their best to rotate and do the best they can, because the pandemic was so hard, and still the aftermath of the pandemic and Hurricane Ida as well, for children and families, because we know people were stuck at home with their abusive partners, or just out and about trying to do day-to-day things, and especially with sexual assault, there's a lot that happened with children as well, being in those tight spots. So we're trying our best, but that's the next level right now is the annex, and the annex back up and running.
Well, that service you provide, that shelter, Crescent House, literally can be life-saving for survivors of abuse. So thank you all so much for doing that. Yes. Javonda, what can I say? That is such valuable information you share, particularly the 24/7 hotline. That is so important, having that availability where people can reach out around the clock and someone will be there to help support them. The legal services that you all provide is invaluable. Thank you so much for that work, and for the work that STAR is doing. Just out of curiosity, how many calls do you guys average a week on your hotline?
I don't want to even tell you a fib, but it is so many. Like, whether they're calling the office or the hotline, it's so many calls that come through. It is hard to like just keep up with, for as like, every advocate here has a caseload full to capacity. Let's just say that. So survivors, the good thing is survivors are finding us and they are getting provided the services that they need. And that's the most important and valuable thing that we could do in our line of work.
Yes. I would not be shocked at the number at all. It's such a valuable service, and to have it available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where survivors can reach out to you all, such a valuable resource and service that's available. Just a quick question, if you will. We've probably been aware of and seeing a lot of information on the news around this issue of sexual assault by the clergy. Any comments you want to make about that? Any information that might be useful to young persons who are in these religious organizations that are working with clergy persons to help them prevent some of these activities?
Well, as Ms. Hayes mentioned earlier, sexual assault happens by anybody. So a perpetrator can be anybody. It can be your cousin, your dad, your mother. It can be a minister. It can be someone of clergy. So the most important thing is that we allow, whether that's children or adults, because it happened to them while they were children, and they are adults now, to let them know that there are services out here to help you to get counseling, to be connected to different resources. Clergy, they are human beings as well. So like I say, they are perpetrators. They can be perpetrators. So just letting survivors know that they haven't done anything wrong and they shouldn't blame themselves for what has happened to them. We have to put the blame on the perpetrator at all times.
Thank you so much, Javonda. Thank all of you. Casey, well, certainly thank you, and we want to thank the Tulane School of Social Work Student Government Association for partnering with the Health Spot to conduct this very important webinar. And we certainly want to partner with SDA in the future to do more of these events. So thank you so much for that. We certainly want to thank Jeremy for helping plan and coordinate this event. Certainly a shout out goes out to Dr. Hayes for this whole Health Spot concept that's extremely important and valuable to our community. And last but not least, all I can say is carry. You are so valuable to partner in this. I don't know what we would do if you left us. And I don't know if you read the small print on the contract. You need to read it because it says you're going to have to be with us forever. So we want to thank you so much for putting this on, and without you, we would not be successful at all. I think we also making available CEUs for this, Dr. Hayes. You want to comment about that?
Carrie will be sending out surveys soon, and you will be asked to complete the survey, and with the survey, you will get your CEU certificate. So look for your email with the survey, and if you don't get it within the next 2 weeks, it may have gone to spam. Check your spam.
Thank you. And again, thank each and every one of you for this really valuable work. Don't hesitate to call upon us in the School of Social Work to see how we can contribute in a meaningful way to the work that you all are doing as well. So thank you all so much. Have a very blessed week, and please enjoy the rest of your weekend, not just with yourselves, but with those who are dear to you also.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.